Hello there, everybody. I can see participants joining now. Can you just wave off your hands and indicate from which country you are? Where are you live from? Great. I see Palvinder Kaur Renu has raised. Yes, good. I can see 3 more participants there. Simply good. Is this beautiful evening? Yes, I can see. So, lot of enthusiastic audiences here. I can see Megha, Chandrajit, Kavita, Rachna, simply good. And I can also see Nutan, Saili. Can you all tell me where are you all from? Just before we get along with the session in next couple of minutes. I am able to hear really good. Someone from Nasik, Hyderabad, Kilbil, St. Joseph's, really good. Okay. Someone from Mumbai, fantastic. We have an amazing audience here today. Okay. Let me introduce you to my co-panelist, Dr. Ruta. Say hi, Dr. Ruta.
Namaskar. Good evening, all.
Can you hear Dr. Ruta?
Oh, great.
Great. So, okay. So, friends, so we are starting with this first part of the webinar. There's a lot more to come again. And I would want everybody to just, if you have any questions coming up, you would be able to post it on the question and answer tab. And we'll be happy to answer all of your questions, most of your questions in the session itself. If not, we'll be able to come back to you on it personally on your email. Great. So let's start our today's this wonderful session with a small introduction of what we are and what we do. So myself is Dr. Vishal Sangle. I am a clinical psychologist and co-founder of Brainbug. And my colleague, Dr. Ruta Savarkar, is a founder of Brainbug and she is a pediatrician. We've been working in this area for the past 10 years and considering that a lot of challenges have of late come up in this couple of months, we thought that why not, students and professionals working with schools and colleges and certain other areas where they take care of students or children specifically, why not enlighten and share our understanding of how emotional health is important, how to take care of these emotional issues of kids, and also to set up some plans of mitigation and handling of these challenges uh, with the specific methods and techniques that specifically will lead you all to be able to measure and also intervene these challenges of the kids. So let's start with a small understanding. You all must have known that we all have a certain degree of emotional imbalances, and these emotional challenges or emotional imbalances are pretty susceptible to the situations around you which make you vulnerable and maybe succumb to the challenge, the hazards of it. Now, typically speaking, why we have this kind of emotional vulnerability, or rather we can say how we relate to some kind of emotions which are not adaptive to the situations. You must understand the basis of the neurology of it. If you understand the neuroscience of emotions, you'll be pretty much in capacity or in understanding how to channelize them in the students, in the children around you. It's important. So let's understand how the neuroscience of the emotions work. Let me switch on to the next slide here. Yeah. Now this slide will show you a figure, a diagram of brain. You may see there are two areas of brain here. One is amygdala and the second is prefrontal cortex. Don't get troubled by the words or the heavy jargons that will be used, but try to understand the basis of it. What is amygdala? Amygdala is one of the centers in your midbrain which is responsible to perceive threats, to perceive anything around you that will alert the response, the brain particularly, to respond in a very typical way of freeze, flight, or the fear mechanism that sets up in the understanding of like what to reflect, what to give away in terms of the incoming emotion that is happening. Now this amygdala is always in continuous looking for perceptions of threat. What happens is the other part of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex that you see at the edge of the front end of the brain, that is one of the very sophisticated and highly developed area which relates to the decision making, analyzing, and forming your responses which are logical, which are thoughtful. Typically, what happens is when amygdala is overpowering with emotions, specifically when it perceives it as threat, it absorbs all the information from the prefrontal cortex, and it does not give, we do not give a very thoughtful response. And we usually burst out in an emotion. We give away the emotion, the response, which is very emotional. Mind you, this is very important. Why I'm telling you this is, amygdala, it's not only looking for the death or maybe threats relating to only harming or the body or like the death threats or something like that. Some examples like unappreciation, like not paying enough attention to the kid, the kid is not feeling that he is recognized, the kid is not feeling that the parents or maybe teachers are making enough efforts to get him into the society or into the group. This also threatens the amygdala. And the response that the kid or maybe the child gives is, which is unthoughtful. You find that this is important from the perspective that this also raises certain critical, neurochemicals in the body. When typically you find the response is like out of anger, out of gloom, out of boredom, out of grief, or out of fear, then there is a set of neurochemicals that is poured into the system. This set of neurochemicals is important to function normally as well, but it also enhances the stress mechanism. And in the next slide, I'm going to focus on that aspect particularly. If you see the brain activity and the performance, if this neurochemical, take for example cortisol is a neurochemical that, or maybe the endocrine gland that secretes this is adrenaline. When it comes to the system, it is important for us to function normally in the eustress. But when the level of cortisol is low, kids may land up into boredom, where the performance goes lower. When it is high, as we recall in our earlier slide, when the amygdala perceives everything as a threat, the response is more of a kind of anger or maybe disobedience or maybe threat perception. There is a high level of cortisol coming in the system where the stress enhances and the performance also goes down. The optimum level of cortisol to be into system in our body to be able to respond, to be able to have better performance is in the optimal level that you see on the graph. This typically is called as flow. Everybody can experience and also experiences flow once the opportunity meets skills. when enough of skills are found in a child, if an opportunity is given of equal value, there is a state which comes into the child's experience, and that is flow. Everybody can have it. Take for a case an example of a tabla player who exceptionally plays tabla, and uh, he gets a platform to exhibit his skills, maybe a concert, and there his skills are nurtured and also appreciated. So he may land up in a state of flow where exhibition of his skills are to be the optimum level. So what happens actually in this case is, if you recall from the first slide, if you see that the environment which is not conducive, if you create a system or a surrounding around the child where he is always been in a state of non-appreciation, or not getting enough dues or response, or maybe some kind of comparison that is made around him with his siblings or with his peers, there is a state where he perceives it as threat. The cortisol levels goes up, and either he or she can go into stress, or when you find optimally the other way around, there is nothing challenging happening around him, he may land up into boredom. So what is needed is an environment that is created for this. The second aspect I would want you to ponder upon is the peer-to-peer relation of the child. My colleague will be focusing on detail on this, but I would want to make you understand a little neurobiology of it. You must have heard about the neuroplasticity or neural pathways or neural circuitry that is developed in the brain. Our brain harbors billions and billions of neurons. They are connected to each other through a pathway normally called as synapse. These synaptic junctions transmit the information from one neuron to other neuron. And the habits that we grow with, the behavior that we exhibit, and the aspect of recurring things we do all our life are because of the pathways that we are strengthened over a period of time. This becomes our habit. We can always grow with new pathways always, and we always be able to learn new things because of this neural circuitry that is formed always. Important thing to notice here is the opportunity windows for kids from 0 to 5 is highest while they are best in give me a minute. I'm the Facebook live has been, it has gone off. I'm just putting it on live on Facebook again. A lot of people were not able to come to the session, so we managed it to put it into the Facebook live. So yes, I'm getting into the Facebook live. Hope people over there are able to get along with. Meanwhile, I'll be completing it in a minute, and maybe we'll be able to also exhibit the same thing. So yes, I'm live on Facebook again. So what I was telling was the relation with the neural circuitry with your habits, with your day-to-day things that you do. They are because there is a strong neural circuits that are built. Now, it's not only the circuits that are inside the individual, it's also about two brains interacting with each other where social circuitry is formed. An increasing amount of research have shown when two people converse, or they relate to each other, or when they talk to each other, there's an invisible way of the aspect of circuitry that is built between these two brains, which is called as social brain or maybe social circuitry. It's like mirror neurons. Our neurons respond to the in synchronicity with the other person in front of you. If you consider this neuropsychology or neurobiology of brain, the first is how you get the threat perceptions. The second is how your cortisol levels goes up in the stressful situations, or maybe come down in the boredom situations, and the social circuitry of brain. Then you'll find that what you can do is are 4 or 5 important ways to manage these things. To be very specific, let me share the imparting this training to children. How do you do that? If you are able to see the screen, we create an environment which is more conducive. See, students learn with 2 important things, observation and imitation. When we create an environment where they can imitate good things through their, as I said, the circuitry is developed, they imitate, the opportunity windows are high. In the first, 5 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, later they sink. And when they sink, the ability to learn new things goes down. So create an environment which is more conducive, which is more, encouraging for the child to imitate and observe. I would also ponder a little upon the empathy, but more to come from my colleague, Dr. Ruta. You must cultivate a sense of empathetic connect. It's important that you have to have one thing, that is understanding the other person's emotions and thoughts, like you have always understanding your kids. But empathetic connect is a very crucial aspect of this, and maybe Dr. Ruta can explain this in a lot better way. Third thing that I would encourage with is, while you deal with kids, it's important that you train them into cognitive control. You must have known this experiment, a famous experiment of marshmallows, where kids were given marshmallows and they were observed in a room, and they were told with the experimenter that they will be getting one more marshmallow dish when they come back again, when the experimenter comes back again. And they were observed for some while. Some kids ate away the marshmallows, some did not, and some had half the way around. While the experimenter came back, the ones who did not eat the marshmallows, they were given the marshmallows again, one more, as promised. But later, if you understand, they were tracked for almost, it's a longitudinal experiment, more than a decade long. And you will be surprised that the ones who were, controlled their desire to eat marshmallow until the experimenter comes, they were doing really good in their high schools, in their collegiate systems. While the others were not performing as good as what you see, in their high school. So this cognitive control is an important aspect that you must develop into kids. One of the important ways of developing it is like, making them aware of the stimulus and the response gap. This is important from the perspective that delayed gratification, or delaying this gap, enhances their patience. And you always must have known that patience is one of the most important factors to nurture in kids. You must also teach them the triggers and how to manage them. Triggers are the ones happening in the environment to elicit the kind of response or emotions that amygdala perceives as threat. If these triggers appear in the environment, the management of these triggers must be made from the perspective of how they will be able to, calm their amygdala with the help of prefrontal cortex, with the dialogue that happens with PFC and the amygdala, to make sure they are, in control. With this, I would invite our co-panelist, Dr. Ruta Savarkar, to come in.
Namaskar.
Yes.
Thank you, Vishal. So now we have gone through a very beautiful journey through our synapses to understand how our brain actually behaves, or how the processes happen, how the body and mind, they are interconnected. So, being a pediatrician, it is most of the times I have to deal with the kid from infancy to the age of 16 years with the empathy. Because when the kid is of 2 days or 5 days just crying, whether the child is having some mosquito bite or a nappy rash or abdominal pain, the most important thing is to connect with the child. And second important thing, with my experience, I have known I have to connect with the child's mother and father. Yes, first and foremost, let me congratulate all of you because you have taken the responsibility of parenthood. You are a teacher, you are a parent, mother and father, and most importantly, you are a guardian, a caretaker. Have you ever thought of cherishing this satisfaction that yes, I have taken this responsibility and it is really a great thing to cherish and understand and to experience. So understand very important thing. If we are dealing with well-being of a child, it is directly connected with well-being of us. Whatever we are having with us, we can give it to the kid. If we are happy, we can give the happiness. If we are satisfied, we can simply transmit the satisfaction to our kid. Am I right? Okay. So actually we are connected virtually. So what child is having the strongest capacity in them? May I say imagination? For learning, imagination is the first thing comes into children's mind. So to understand the connectivity and to understand the empathy with the kid, can you just be with the child, empathize with your own kid or a child within you, and remember your mother? Please be with me. Now imagine this hand is your mother's hand, and she is keeping her hand on your head, exactly on the anterior frontal, which was open when you were born. It was open, right? And just feel the hand. Very simple exercise of imagination and learning, understanding and empathizing. How many of you have actually done this? Just say yes to yourself. This experiment, why I am sharing with you, because being a parent, being a teacher, being a friend, being a guardian of a kid, you have to actually connect with them. In Shastra, it is known as Astitva. We shall explain the very important thing that amygdala is dealing with Astitva, survival, life, living, and your thoughts and emotions. Attention seeking in children. Actually, we tag them as ADHD and all that, attention deficit. But you know, every normal person needs attention, appreciation. Again, these two things come with thinking and emotions. How it is actually connected with physical part? May I explain? Yes, Vishal?
You need to explain the practical again. Someone is asking the practical that you showed.
Okay. I said connect the child within you, and the most powerful power or part of child's learning is imagination. So imagine this is your mother's hand, and just keep this hand on your head where it was an anterior frontal, and feel the hand, feel the love of your mother, and be grateful to your mother who has given birth to you. From two cells, now you have become a human being. So from imagination, empathy, till the gratitude towards your mother and father, this is a simple journey of learning. And children actually love to learn with experiments, with connections, with empathy. And this is very important that when we are dealing with them, we have to share love, care, and respect. Why this third factor is coming into view nowadays? See, simply around 50 years back in India, it was very okay to have 5 children to mother and father. 4 to 5 siblings, brothers and sisters sharing very small home. And it was very easy to share, to sacrifice, to understand, to adapt, whether with positivity or sometimes with forced mothers or fathers saying. But at that time, it was actually a practice to sacrifice, to share the space. But now, when it is a nuclear family, less likely very crowded family, at that time, naturally the parents have given more space to their kids. Even in the school, most of the schools are managing 1:20 ratio of teacher and students. Again, we have given a space to them. Now this kid, this child, while growing up, may be unnoticed, but he or she is actually in need of that space, or he's just adapted to that, and he accepts that it is simple, it's my part, that you should respect me as a person. Now what happens is, because of sometimes there is slight delay in expression of respect. There is love, there is intention of care, but expression of respect may be delayed or slightly less. And this new generation actually understand this as lack of love and care and attention. So this is simply communication gap. It can be absolutely clear with your connectivity, empathy, and very importantly, listening. Dr. Vishal has just shared the marshmallow phenomena. Patience is so much important. Yes, definitely. If we want to teach patience to our kid, yes, it is very important in his family life, in his professional life. So first and foremost, we are the adults. We, the parents, the teachers, his or her friends are the adults, and we should practice patience so that they can see it, because they are going to follow us. We don't have to say that, "Ki follow me." It's simply they will observe you, they will understand, they know, they accept, and they follow. This is the chain reaction. So understanding the well-being of a kid is first and foremost well-being of self, well-being of a parent, teacher, a guardian, because child and his or her surroundings are so important for development of a complete strong personality of a kid. Next, please. So well-being of a child at physical health level, emotional health, family health, and social health. So all these factors, they are not watertight compartments, they are interrelated. Okay, and these are applicable to every person. Even though I am explaining the well-being of a child, yes, it is actually applicable to the parent, to every person. Now let me explain you very small thing, physical health and emotional health. Okay, the second important thing, child wants to learn with practical, with, have one thing to say, learning methodology, what is the best, it is from storytelling. They listen to you very curiously and with complete attention if you are telling the story. So again, I am requesting you to be connected with the kid inside you and listen to a story with me. I'm sharing a very simple case. Of course, I am not sharing the name. She was 13 years girl. She came to me with depression, and it was a vicious cycle. She was a very bright student in first and third standard, first to third standard, and then suddenly some family part had some stress levels, economical stress at her family level, and her scholastic expressions or her part was, say, like she was a A plus kid and now it was like B or B plus. So it was again depressive part for her. When she came to me, her parents were worried. Even her teacher explained to me that she is not enthusiastic in the class. She doesn't complete her homework. So actually, what went wrong? The child of 13 years old, she has started her menses and the blood flow was bit more and it was not compensated with nutrition. So she landed up in anemia. It was not so severe to be detected clinically, but actually she was feeling sleepy. She was feeling tired, not able to understand 45 minutes teacher's lecture. She was not able to complete the homework because her stamina was falling. She was in a simple state of hormonal changes, some uh, unease state, and low hemoglobin level. So when we corrected these three within 2 months of time span, yes, she was the same again. Enthusiastic, happy, a giggly child, and her schoolwork was absolutely fantastic. So depression in children, we treat them so seriously. If you connect with them with as a person as a whole, sometimes there are no complicated reasons. There are 2, 3 simple and small parts. So understand this story. It was having some family problems. Then it was having the hormonal problems leading to not a complete nutritional care and leading to depression. Now I will explain you very different story. Excuse me for this because I'm very open-minded person and a very straightforward talking person. So I will explain you a simple case of one ADHD child with autism. He was very violent at school. He was very uh, hyperactive at home, and his parents were like, "Oh, I can't deal with him. We are tired." So what happened with the kid? Understand? This part was actually physical because after second or third session, second or third session, lastly, the parents explained to me, yes, this child is adopted. We are not real parents. And now we are actually confused that how to deal with the kid. So understand, this kid has undergone all the physical and emotional challenges in the intrauterine life itself. And it was presenting in this uh, part at, let's say, 7 to 8 years the child was first year, uh, and he was actually expressing as autistic and suddenly violent and ADHD child. So to deal with this, yes, we have actually empathized the parents, treated them first, then trained them, and yes, the child is out of these problems. He is no more violent. He's okay with his peers. He's okay with his teachers, and yes, he listens to the teachers and parents, and they actually talk to him and connect to him. The third part of well-being of a child, family health. Yes, I have explained that part in first story. The second part I will explain. See, very importantly, mother and father, they both play a complete role, right from giving the birth to the child. They are actually nurturing, giving nutrients through their mind and through the food, both. So, family, as per se, is a complete support to develop the complete personality of a child. Single parent or disturbed family part leads to some problems. Actually, there are coming some questions, but we'll deal with them later. I will just complete the part. So family health is really important, really, really important. And the person who is a caretaker of a child or who is a teacher should understand, should connect with the parent to understand the family status also. And most importantly, when we are dealing with the child care, there should be a transparency, there should be expression, there should be a complete sharing of history. Now, third part, social health. I will just explain in a few parts. See, now the COVID-19, the pandemic, the epidemic, endemic, all the things are going on. And what is happening? When we are watching the news, even my best friend who is of 5 years old, he says, I have to take care of hand sanitization. I have to keep a social distancing. So I explained to him, it is not social distancing, my sweetu, it is physical distancing. So you can play with your playmates and he is happy. So actually whatever happening into the society, which is the surrounding of a kid, children are so absorptive and they are so observative that they listen everything what is going on surrounding them, and it is actually stored in their hard disk. So social health should also be taken care very nicely, and to understand that the economical and social part of the kid should be understood by the caretaker. Next slide, Vishal. Okay.
Very good.
So these interconnected health issues are understanding the various spheres of every person's well-being. Sometimes we say that emotional health is secondary, not so important. But understand that even diabetes or hypertension, these things, the etiological factor for these are known as stress. Again, emotional factor. Okay, we are on the next beautiful slide. It is related with connectivity. Here I am saying parents and child connection. Actually, understand these two cells, sperm and zygote. This is the creation. When husband and wife say, now we want to become mother and father, this is the conception. First base of conception is here because you have taken the responsibility. Let me share with you some of the newly married couples. When they come and meet me, they say we are not ready yet to become parents. We don't have the courage to take the responsibility. So my dear parents and teachers, my heartful congratulations and respect to you that you have taken that responsibility with a complete sacrifice, love and care. So you are connected. This is the most important thing. Let me understand this part also. See, intrauterine life, the mother is supplying all the oxygen, nutrition through the placenta, through the umbilical cord to the baby. Child is receiving all these things and child is getting developed as a complete personality. And yes, along with this is blood. She is not only transmitting the oxygen and carbohydrates and fats and proteins. Actually, she is transmitting all the neurochemicals also. If she is happy, she is transmitting the endorphins, happy hormones to the child intrauterine life. If she is angry, she is transmitting the adrenaline to the kid. It is traveling through placenta. We are connected. Parents, as a parent, we have not only given the genes as XX or XY, but we have given them the samskaras also. These genes, we know that yes, few are the hereditary disorders. Sometimes we just accept, oh, my grandmother was having diabetes, my father is also suffering from diabetes, maybe I'm prone for diabetes. So you are ready to accept these hereditary disorders which can be transmitted through genes. But do we accept that all our positivity, all our positive thoughts, all our positive deeds, all our positive emotions, they are also transmitted? Yes, surely. The fourth part I'm explaining to you is aura, or it is called as the Panchakoshas. So we, as a person, are connected with the other person. As Dr. Vishal has explained to you, the mirror neurons. Okay, so you understood the neuronal part of it. I'm explaining this part of it. Annamaya kosha, pranamaya kosha, manomaya kosha, vidyanamaya and anandamaya kosha. Just understand we are connected with these koshas also with each other. Simple. Kids are very, what you can say, receptive to deal with these things also. They are subtle. They are sometimes intuitive or can be felt when you are at ease. So Annamaya kosha is directly related with nutrition. So nutrition is not only food. Nutrition is breath. Yes, oxygen is most important. So you are taking in the prana, pranavayu in your body, which is actually giving you direct energy, power, vitality. So this prana and mana, they are interrelated. How? Understand. If you are very angry or if you are very much depressed, try simple thing. Try deep breathing and understand what is happening with your mind. Okay? Or vice versa. If you are angry, what is happening to your breath? This is interconnected. It should be experienced and then explained. So very simple things. First, we should know. Then we should accept. Then we should think about it, have the emotional base, and then we should act on it. This is the pathway to connect, to deal, to take care of your child and every person. Next slide, Vishal. I hope I'm not too fast to make you understand that, because I'm just sharing. I'm not preaching. So these emotional challenges, these behavioral challenges, how to take care of these things. Let me share you one joke. One of my colleague was saying, it is very tough to handle nowadays to handle our kids. I said, handle? This is no cycle to handle that kid. This is no motorbike to handle. This is to deal. This is to connect. This is to respect. So the behavioral challenges, very important, is you should deal with love, care, respect, positive communication. Why I'm saying positive communication? If you are thinking, oh, I love my kid, I respect my kid, but if you don't show, if you don't say, sometimes few parents are, they are not so expressive. They say, what is the use? Why should I express to my kid that I love him? I'm doing my job, yeah. I love him. I'm taking care of him. But understand this important thing. Maybe your kid needs attention. Maybe your kids needs a communication. Your child needs a hug. So positive communication I always explain these things. If you are feeling guilty that I can't share much of a time with my child, don't feel guilty. If you are not giving the quantity, focus on the quality. Even though you are returning from your workplace at say 11 p.m. and something, and your child is in a deep sleep, so you can't communicate positively. Yes, you can communicate. Just touch. Panchendriyas. You can connect. If you don't want to connect with your verbal communication, connect with your touch. So positive communication is very important. Now, we have to balance the love and care and discipline. Yes. While we are explaining the discipline, we should actually demonstrate the discipline. Most importantly, hard work. Yes. Synapse, Vishal has explained to you. So forming the pathways, the synaptic pathways, even though your child is having a very good IQ, but if he is not hardworking, then these pathways will not develop so firmly. So hard work is most important. And yes, you are the adults, the teachers, the parents, they are the adults. And yes, most importantly, but last, they are the goals. Short-term goals and long-term goals. What I'm saying, this is not related with only career. Okay, that short-term goal of my kid is to get A plus in the school, and the long-term goal is he should become some IS officer. Let it be. They are good, but understand that profession is not the complete part of your life circle. The morals and values are really most important parts of your life, of every person's life. So short-term goals should be to understand the values, to know the ethics, and yes, to express them. And long-term goals, becoming a good individual. If you go for any aptitude test, yes, there are so many different things now should understand, like a leadership, your attitude, your kindness, your empathy, connectivity. All these things are based on these values and ethics. So I accept at one point that as a teacher, as a parent, sometimes we get disappointed. Oh, I have given them so much love. My intentions are so good, but they don't respect me. You are disappointed, sometimes you are hurt. Yes, it is really likely because expression of our generation is different, and nowadays their generation expresses very different in a verbal ways. So again, have a patience, don't get disappointed, don't get hurt, understand what they mean, and then set the short-term goals and long-term goals for both of us, personally for self and then for the kid, because they are going to follow. Now last, please allow me to explain the definition of parenting explained in our Shastras. Parenting is complete giving without expecting anything in return. When we are married to our partner, again, it is sharing. It is partnership. We say it is a life partner. But as a parent, we are actually giving without expecting anything for own or person wise. Because if you are becoming the best parent, what happens, you know, the child will become the best parent for his or her own kid. So whatever you are sowing the seeds now, they will be ripe for the generations together, not for you. So if sometimes because of miscommunication, child is not giving respect, child is not understanding your intention, good intentions, very simply have patience, forgive, keep calm, understand the definition of parenting, and give. Am I right? I hope you accept this because you have accepted very simply becoming a parent. You have given so many things to your kid. It is a progeny. Every animal, every crop, every plant is reproducing. So, what is the difference being a human? We can think, we have emotions, and we can completely understand the core of humanity, that is Atman. So, being a parent, it's simply practicing a spirituality. Thank you very much for being with me.
There are certain questions. So I would want to make you understand what are the questions, and then we will answer them. Some of the questions I've answered in the QA section. So one of the questions that has come up from the panel is nowadays there are no more ADHD children. What would be the reason behind it? Interestingly, more number of ADHD children that you're saying. So very good question by Megha, and she's asked that why there are more number of ADHD children nowadays. See, you must understand one thing: the amount of information that has exploded over a period of time, and the number of stimulus is going into the child's brain or child's sensory system is quite humongous. Consider it 20 years back or maybe 10 years back or not 15 years back, the information that was coming in was pretty less. Now information by its own virtue has the ability to attract attention. Take for example, you yourself, you must be attending this webinar and there must be some mobile that is vibrating with messages or maybe phone call. Your attention goes over there. So attention is directed towards where the data is coming from. Now consider a child who is exposed to television, to mobile, to friends, to new technology around them, or maybe lot many number of things which maybe half of your lifetime you must have not been experiencing as of now. So there is a huge amount of information that is coming through, and hence there is a definitive amount of attention deficit happening with the kids. They're not kids. They're not able to express the kind of the attention, focus it towards a particular thing, because information by its sheer magnitude is attracting their attention towards diverse things. So this is one of the reasons that is primarily the best way to handle it is minimizing the stimuluses. If you are able to minimize the stimuluses, that is where you can control the attention in a very focused way. The second question that has been asked is how your examples are very good and generalized. Can you explain how to develop counseling methods after post-COVID situations? My dear friend Ravi, Ravi's asked it. This is a very good question pertaining to the current times. I would encourage all of you caregivers, school teachers, and maybe parents to develop a sense of resilience and adaptability within your kids, within yourselves as well. The best way to, as I've said earlier, there are two centers in your brain. One of the centers is prefrontal cortex, which is one of the logical and most sophisticated centers in your brain, which is involved into some of the best, decision making, analyzing, and scrutinizing things and making a thoughtful response. Now, the ally of this center is there are two allies to this centers. One of the allies is breath, oxygen. A good amount of inhalation, breathing exercise, exhalation that you do with a controlled breathe or maybe some kind of conventional methods like pranayama is best way to build a resilient being. So if you practice controlled breathing, or maybe practice breathing every for 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, one of the best things can happen to you is you can build a resilient character. Second thing that is most important in these times is a feeling of gratitude. If you develop a sense of gratitude towards things around you, you come out of that mental scarcity, that state of perpetual complaining and pursuing threat around you and finding that you are in a loss always. You come suddenly into a state of abundance. You're grateful for the things happening around you. Now you may say that in this crisis, how could we be grateful to the crisis? Try to see the important aspect in this thing. If you see, even in the it's like, it's in the words of Rabindranath Tagore, it's like in the hope is a bird which sings when the dawn is still dark. It sees hope, and this hope is essentially is an optimism, is an aspect of positive attitude towards things around you. If you can see that, that will lead you to be more adaptive and more resilient, feeling great about things around yourself. So these are the two things that you must perpetuate and maybe inculcate in yourselves as well. There's this third question that has come up, and that is, how do we deal with laziness of our kids? As I've said, laziness is a state of boredom. They don't have something exciting to do. You have to maintain the balance of stress and excitement with and the laziness amongst the kids. The best part is, I would say, kids at home imitate imitate their parents, their friends around them. Let me tell you an example. The best thing is, if you ask them to do something and they say every time, no, I don't want to do this thing, or maybe I'll do it later, and you tag them as lazy. This is because in the family or around them, they've seen this response coming from either father or mother to either of the spouses. Like if a father asks mother to do something, if she's engaged in some kind of work or something, she'll just say that, no, I'll do it later. I won't do it now. Similarly, if a mother asks father like to do something, and the father says, I'm busy, I won't be doing it now, the kids are there around you, they listen, and they'll find that this is a good way to respond. So they'll always come back and say, if you ask them to something to do, they'll say, no, I'll do it later. Well, I won't do it. So this is because they have understood. Now you'll say how to overcome, because you're genuinely busy, so you deny the work that either of your spouses asked. Best way to say it is, I would do it, but I would do it sometime later, or give a time to do that. Maybe have these discussions not in front of your kids. If it is unavoidable, set a deadline, set a time to do it, so that their kids understand that it is important that mother is asked to do something and I'll be doing it in some time. So this is one thing. And second thing is, laziness can be taken away with exercise, with play. Take them to play. Sedentary work style does not help. They create a lot of trouble in near future or maybe in the adulthood of the kids. So best way to get away with it is getting into ground and play. So there are some more questions. One of the questions is how to deal with the children of single parent or divorced parents, as there are imbalances in the children's behavior. Good thing. This question is asked by Flora, and Flora, it's important that the increasing number of single parents have also taken a burden not only on the parent but also on the kid. And it is the dual role that the single parent or parent does to the kid, to be a mother and a father all together in that single thing. So the imbalance that sets up in the children is not because you are single parent. That's not the case. It's like this. If a parent is building the character, or maybe imparting the ways and means to deal with the world to his or her child, if you do it with a lot of empathy, a lot of responsibility, love, care, and affection, I can ensure with a lot of responsibility that the child grows up with more of such virtues and qualities around him. The only challenge here is we find that I am divorced or I am single parent, and this state has brought me to handle my kid with certain deprivations. As I said, finding the state of gratefulness, if you build that sense of gratitude within you, the same thing will create a sense of abundance. It's not, say, I can tell you there are examples where children have grown orphan and they've been immensely benefited with the state of their upbringing, not because they were devoid of the love of the parents, but because what environment they must have got in the conducive, they were able to relate to their in their future, in their grown-up stages, to be more balanced individuals. So I believe this, it's up to you. Kids are at receiving end. Kids are always at receiving end until they become their own decision makers, and that is we have assigned a very legal date to it as well. But talking very psychobiologically, they also, you share a vicarious responsibility with them. So coming back to that state of imparting a responsible, caring, and loved, empathetic way of doing it will definitely make sure that their balance is restored.
If the single parent is enjoying the parenting, fulfills.
Yes. There's a question from Kavita which talks about how to deal with laziness of kids, that they don't know everything but don't want to write anything. As I said, practice matters the most. You try and do a lot of practice. Practice will help to build the pathways which are more engraved and relatively permanent, so that the laziness that has committed, it becomes a habit. This is a part of habit. There's a question from Rachna which talks about why does a child today have a very short attention span, and what can we do as a parent and teacher to improve it? As I've earlier answered, attention is not a problem. Try to understand. Anybody has a maximum attention span of 10 to 15 minutes, even the grown-ups. The problem here is if you give them a movie to watch for like 2 hours or 2.5 hours, they can do it uninterruptedly, without any deviation of attention. The problem here is not of attention, but of interest. And you must constantly work upon getting them very interesting things. If you want to have their attention span to grow or have a focused attention, I will tell you 3 things. One, minimize the number of inputs or stimuluses that is going to the kids from the early childhood. Give them best things, and conventional ways always help. I don't say get away from technology, but yes, have big screens. Do not get to small screens like your phones or iPads. Give them big screens to visualize. And second thing is, while attention, I would encourage you to make them also go through the breathing techniques. It's a simple technique. Kids can do wonders while they learn this technique early on. I would encourage whichever breathing technique, whether it is pranayama or maybe controlled breathing, like exhalation, holding, and inhalation, holding, and exhalation. No exertion required. Doing this for a few minutes actually strengthens your muscle of your brain, or if your mind of attention. The third thing that I would encourage while you must grow up on attention is cutting off the debris from your working memory. Working memory is a part of your prefrontal cortex, which is working for attention. It gets in a lot of inputs. It's like a CPU of a phone or of a computer. If you switch on a lot of process over there, your phone hangs up. What you do there is you refresh it, or you turn it off and turn it on again. We cannot turn ourselves off. You can definitely refresh it. So getting a lot of information in your working memory does not help. Cut down the flow of information. That's where it is required. Thank you, Rachana. There's a question from Prakash which talks about my class have a child with special needs. Okay. I use different methods to drag his attention for study. Nothing worked so far. How to make him study? Okay, so special needs will need again, some of the interventions which will be very specific to the kid, knowing that what troubles or challenges he or she is going through. But I would encourage that someone is asking about breathing technique. I think we should demonstrate a small breathing technique here, so that it becomes easy for us to, maybe Prakash can also benefit with the kids' attention. Yes. As of now. There's a question from Ravi. Before we go to the other questions, uh, uh, I would like to demonstrate the breathing. Dr. Ruta can take it over for demonstration.
Demonstrate, you say.
Okay, fine.
Left nostril open.
Let me make sure that Dr. Ruta is visible here. Are you able to see everybody, Dr. Ruta? Yeah, great. So you are able to see. I'm gonna reseat the technique. Maybe Dr. Ruta can demonstrate you visually. The best thing is you start with your left nostril open. Keep open your left nostril. Put a thumb on your right nostril. Inhale through your left nostril. Take a deep breath. Put your finger on your left nostril. Hold for a while. Don't exert. And from right nostril, breathe away. Exhale. You cannot see her. There's someone who's saying you cannot see her. Let me. Okay, Kapula, you have to demonstrate it while saying as well. Okay, she's gonna say it while she's doing it.
Okay. Right thumb. Close your right nostril. Put these two fingers on your Ajna chakra. To start with, you are going to inhale from the left nostril. Breathe in. Close your left nostril. Pause. Breathe out from right nostril. Close your right nostril. Pause. Now breathe in. Inhale from right nostril. Pause. And then exhale from the left nostril. Pause. This is one cycle. Am I clear?
Okay. I think this works for you.
So holding of breath is not counting any 1, 2, 3, 4 or 20, 36. Don't. Hold on your breath just for few seconds. You should feel at ease for holding the breath after inhaling or exhaling.
Okay. Let me come back to you. Let me come back to you all. So we've seen this exercise. We go on to the next question, and the question is relating to the current pandemic. Things in the current pandemics, things have changed. Exams have lost its importance, whereas social media is gaining popularity. How to balance these issues? Okay, good question. Good thing is we cannot get away from the technology or social media. This has become a part of our kids, and it's increasingly become popular. The pandemic will definitely subside. It's not a perpetual state. Everything passes on. The best thing is what you can regulate as of now is the streamlining of the social media, or per se the screens. I would focus on the screens. Do not hand over small screen to your kids before the right age, and the right age I would believe is beyond the teen, like after not late teens. I would believe 16, 17, 18 is good time as a thing, but before that do not hand over small screens. If anything needed, you can always have a visibility. The reason I'm telling you small screen is not advisable is because of the privacy. Kids must be able to visualize things in open with everybody. If you do that, it's important because you have a proctored way of doing it. You have a control over their visibility. So that is one of the things. Balancing it is, the best part is define the time when they are using it, define the time when they are not using it, sparing time for exercise, role plays, play methods and everything will definitely raise in their interest in ground activities or maybe physical activities, and this has to be made interesting. So that is the only way of doing it. Sometimes kids become overactive and how to deal with them. I've already answered one thing. Put down the information that is coming up, streamline the flow of information. Okay, I'm not able to see. You're able to see now. When you cut down the information, that is one of the ways of information by its own nature attracts attention. Anything now, if you hear something happening else apart from this webinar, your ears go there. Someone comes in front of you, your eyes go there. Information, data attracts attention. Cutting down the information, streamlining it will increase the focus. How to get emotional attached to my students during online classes? The best thing to do it is your tone, your language, your only things that they can sensibly perceive in depth is your words. Your words should be proper, true to your heart, intentions pure. I believe the best way is modulation of your tone of your voice, your gestures, your way of accepting their participation in the classroom. All these things will matter, but the best part that is in your control is your voice and your gestures. The best way to deal with it is like having good modulation of your voice and gestures. That is where it comes to.
For the special kit, we can just give some feedback.
Yes. So I believe this has been wonderful session as of now. We've tried to answer almost all the questions, and we'll be trying to answer most of them through your email, writing back to you. On behalf of Brainbug and all the panelists here, Dr. Ruta and me, I thank you for attending the session, and we'll be staying tuned with everybody in the email conversations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dhanyawad.